Anyway, thank you all for coming out to another edition of 1 Million Cups Madison. Today we have infamous mothers and the infamous mother herself, Sagacious Levinson.
Show your shirt, you can't.
Representing the brand. And I wish all of our presenters would provide me with t-shirts. So any former presenters out there, I'll take a t-shirt. Anyway, first of all, thank our sponsors. Thank you so much for Field 59. Derek's in the back with the live stream. And then, as always, there will be a recording on our YouTube channel. Just a preview, we will be doing a demo of Facebook live streaming at some point as soon as we figure out the Facebook login credentials. So if anyone has those,
let us know.
Thank you also to Old National Bank for sponsoring the coffee from Crescendo. It's definitely a coffee kind of day, so re-up. I often have to take it back like half full and they get mad at me, so they make me sit and drink the rest of it. So please, have 2 or 3 cups of coffee. I obviously have.
Uber productive for Derek, so I encourage like all the caffeine consumption. Just keep drinking.
I will.
You haven't hit your limit yet.
Drew, how do you carry that thing?
I mean, I'm very
With
strong.
these guns.
You can tell, but
Like Atlas.
yeah, I work out on
You gotta be like that coffee.
actually painfully, because I'm having some biceps tendonitis, but we can talk about
Thanks
that.
for bringing it up.
Anyway, so yeah, and thank you also to the library for this great space and a crack AV team, even if their materials fail on us sometimes. So with that, we're going to kick off introductions, then Sagacious is going to take it over, then some Q&A, and we'll see where it goes from there. So I'm Drew Corson, CSO of Carrick's Consulting Group.
I'm Rachel Neal, CEO, Carrick's Consulting Group.
I'm Leah Rowe, VP of Finance and Operations at Healthfinch, and also founder of Culture Community.
Andrew Gonzalez from Old National Bank.
Ryan Davis, also from Old National Bank.
Steve Claude from 32 Auctions, which is a platform for hosting and managing silent auction fundraisers.
Sure. Go ahead.
Amy Gannon from Doyen. It's an organization that supports women entrepreneurs.
Pete Cavey, Merrill Lynch, here because I never drink coffee alone.
That's smart.
Anaya Brown for Economic Development.
I'm Dan Anderson with the accounting firm of Baker Tilly.
Chandra Miller-Feenan with Starting Block Madison.
Good morning, Alex Ryan with Prairie Light Solar. It's a renewable energy consulting firm.
Hey guys, Seth Braddock, CEO of Kilter Rewards. We're a fitness rewards program.
Laura Benzo, HR Manager at Akita Box.
Laurel Gosheroy, Customer Success at Akita Box.
Derek Gebler, CEO of Field 59.
Howdy y'all, I'm Christopher Patterson. I'm CEO of Medisoft Solutions, and we are a software dev shop focused on pre-Series A tech startups.
Hi, I'm Steve Slatton. I'm here networking.
Hi, Wendy Krause. I'm with Win.
Laurel Lawrence. I'm here from 9 Bar Creative Consulting.
I'm Alex Coffin. I'm a co-founder of Dynamis.
Lisa Krugner-Higbee, Plum Pharmaceuticals.
I'm Tom Willis. I do software engineering and patent consulting for startups.
I'm DP Knudten of Collaborator Creative. I collaborate creatively with companies and individuals on everything from freelance copywriting to full-on nonfiction branding. I'd like to invite you all to an upcoming Dream Bank talk I'm giving on Tuesday, July 11th. If you'd like one of these lovely cards, I have many that I'm trying to liquidate, so please see me.
I'm Carla. I have a professional coaching company called Carla Marie Coaching.
I'm Mike Shales. I'm Leah Rowe's father. And with Shales McNutt Construction.
Okay, well, I don't know how to follow that. I'm Julianne Selesky. I do business development and events at Madison Club.
Kurt Peterson, the other co-founder of 32 Auctions.
Awesome. Welcome. And before I turn it over to you, I'm just going to announce that there's going to be no 1 million cups the week of 4th of July. So next Wednesday on the 5th, no 1 million cups. If you come, the library will be open. There will be no coffee. There will be no presenter. There probably will be chairs. So we'll send out an announcement probably with our next newsletter. Awesome. Then on that note, let's turn things over to Sagacious.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sagacious Levingston. I am the founder and CEO of Infamous Mothers. I listened to all of these CEOs, and I was thinking about when I was going to school for my PhD. I said, I don't want to be called professor because everybody's a professor. I want to be called Sagacious because there's no more Sagacious, right? I'm the only Sagacious. So in this room, since there's so many CEOs, my biggest title right now is Sagacious, so I want you all to, and I know that's a hard name, but it's Sagacious. All right, so I was thinking about how do I start, and I think the regular or the normal pitch would be to say, hi, my name is Sagacious Livingston. I'm the CEO of Infamous Mothers. I provide personal and professional development for women who mother on the margins of society. I also provide professional development for the organizations that impact their lives. But the truth is, I do something way more than the services that I provide. So in the same way that Rolex would tell you that they don't sell watches, they sell luxury, or in the same way that Volvo will say, I don't sell cars, I sell safety, or Revlon will probably say, I don't just sell lipstick, or a photographer will say, I don't just provide images. What we provide is confidence. I can say to you, hi, my name is Sagacious Livingston, and I am in the business of selling, serving, and promoting power. Now, many of you all would say, well, that's a sucky business, because when we think about power, we think about the misuse of it, the mismanagement of it, or the abuse of it. But when you learn a little bit more about the population that I serve, then you will say, okay, well, that makes sense. When we think about power, there are three things that I focus on. I focus on influence, I focus on capacity, and I focus on rights. Who has the right to power? Who has influence? And who has the capacity to affect and bring about change? I serve a population of women that we call infamous mothers. These are women who are teen moms, single moms, baby moms, women who were once addicted to drugs, women who were once sex workers. All of the moms that we love to stigmatize and judge and hate. All of the moms that we love to wag our finger at or compare ourselves to and say, I'm better than her. Those are the moms that I serve. They are called infamous because often we love to focus on the ways in which these women are detestable. The ways in which I am, as a single mom of 6 by 4 different dads, the ways in which I am detestable. But they're also infamous for another reason. In African American culture, we think about the word bad. We're often thinking about the word good. So when I say, ooh, girl, those shoes are bad, I really mean, ooh, girl, those shoes are beautiful. Those shoes are sexy. Those shoes are hot. So when I show up and I work with these moms who are teen moms or single moms or women who are once sex workers or women who once abused drugs or women who are victims of domestic abuse or women who were victims of rape, my job is to show up and to remind them of all the ways in which they are powerful, the ways in which they can influence and affect change, the ways in which they have a right to be heard, and the ways in which they have a right to be made visible. The other piece I do is I show up and I work with organizations, women's organizations, and I tell them in all the ways that these women may be vulnerable and the ways in which these women may struggle and the ways in which these women may face challenges, these women are still powerful. They are not your charity cases. These women are awesome, right? My job is to show up and to remind people that when you provide services for them, you are potentially providing services to a CEO of a company, to a future surgeon, to someone who will somehow impact your life. So treat them well, but also remind them of their power. When I show up and I train businesses, I remind them that these women are people who have grit, they have persevered, they matter in so many ways. And so when you're training folks for upper level management, don't overlook them. When Sheryl Sandberg came up with Lean In, the research has already shown that black women have been leaning in forever. Companies often have a hard time with making room. So the work that I do when I show up is I remind companies that they have the power to make room for these women that we often don't see, and these women are often invisible. So last week, I was thinking about, why is this work needed? When we think about the very field that is supposed to promote the rights of women, the research often shows that these women are not even present in feminism. Feminism is silent on them. When we talk about moms who are making a difference or affecting change, we're thinking about, when we talk about women who are making a difference and affecting change, often these women are the ones that are missing from the conversation. Our minds as a society have not been able to grasp the possibility that a woman who was a teen mom could end up being a CEO, or a woman who was a sex worker could end up being an amazing photographer one day, or a woman who was a baby mom, or a woman who was a victim of domestic abuse could somehow change the world and have an impact. And so if the very field that is supposed to promote the power of these women is silent, then that is a problem. And so my work is about addressing that particular problem. Also last week, I was working with one of the organizations that house the women that I support, and I was showing the women I was talking to them about women who have come before them. And I went from slavery all the way to the present. So often when we think about slavery, we think about Harriet Tubman, and I often talk about a woman named Harriet Jacobs. I talk about Sojourner Truth. I talk about women who were mothers, because when we think about activism, and we go through history, and we go through politics, we often disassociate activism with mothers. Activism and the public sphere has traditionally and historically been a space for men. And so I go all the way back and I say, there was a woman named Harriet Jacobs who hid in the attic for 13 years because she did not want to leave her children. She was a slave and she wanted to escape slavery, but she couldn't bear the thought of leaving her children. So she hid in the attic and was stooped over and looked at her kids through a peephole for 13 years. And her grandma and her family members brought her bread and they fed her while she was in this attic. When she finally escaped, she was stooped over and she was kind of deformed, but she was able to make it north, and she was able to write her autobiography. And I tell these women, you come from a history of women who were considered outsiders in their community, in their time period. And then I fast forward, and I give them an example of Claudette Colvin. Claudette Colvin was the woman who was before Rosa Parks. Before Rosa Parks said, you know, I'm tired, my feet hurt, I'm not going to get up, et cetera, the story that we know there was a teen mom who made that same pronouncement, but she was 15 and she lived in foster care and she wasn't considered acceptable, so she wasn't chosen for the movement. And what I tell these moms is, you come from a history of women who, even though they were outsiders in their society, made a difference. And I remember a woman last week, Candace, saying, you know, I had no idea that when I started having children, I started living the life that I was living, that I had come from this, because the only thing that I've been told, and the only thing that I see for myself, is mugshots. Or I see that I'm a problem in our society, and I see all of these things. But you're telling me something that I've never been told, and you're making me feel different about my possibilities. So when I show up, I don't give power, I just remind people of the power they have and the power that they come from. All right. Now, the question becomes, all right, Tagesha, so you're showing up and you're giving these people this information. What type of solutions are you providing? All right, that's a fair enough question. The work that I've done so far, the solution so far has come in the form of an upcoming coffee table book, which features 20 women who have, what we say, not only gone through the belly of the beast and survived, but they're giving something good back to the community. So these are moms who were marginalized or outsiders in our society, who have shown up and who are changing our society as doctors. So can you imagine? Oh, let's use me as an example. Single mom, 6 kids, 4 different dads, PhD candidate, business owner. Those don't really go together, right? When you imagine a CEO, I'm not what you imagine. When you imagine a PhD candidate or a doctor, and you imagine a woman with 6 kids, that don't usually go together. But the book that we have coming out features 19 other women like me, unicorns, magical women, right? And the reason why that's important is because it doesn't make sense to talk about empowering or reminding people of their power if two things are not happening. You're not providing enough stories to make people feel that this is normal, the women themselves. And if you're not providing the types of stories that make the rest of society so, I didn't know this existed, right? Because really, in all honesty, the only encounters many of us have had with the women I'm calling infamous mothers is what? The nightly news, right? So this is my way of saying, I do have some power. Here's all the ways that I can kind of affect and impact change. Along those lines of the t-shirt, we have the t-shirt because my background is in English literature, it's also in rhetoric, and what I understand is that what you wear makes a statement as much as anything else you read. And so we have t-shirts that are moving around this world that are giving people reminders with these really snazzy sayings that are kind of creating this beautiful disharmony between what you thought you knew and what's really happening. Then that right there is serving the movement and serving the work that we do. Another thing that I offer is trainings. It doesn't make sense to remind these women of their power and the ways in which they make a difference if the organizations that they work with are doing something different, right? So if I show up and say, no, we're not going from welfare to work, we're going from welfare to sustainability. What skill set you have? What have you survived? Okay, how can we turn that? How can we liquidate those skills? How can we do something extraordinary with that? But your caseworker is saying, can you go get a job at McDonald's? Because we just want you to work. And what I'm saying is, but is that sustainable? If you have 5 children, is working at McDonald's really going to bring about the change that you need? Or do you need to sign up for a program like YWeb and you learn coding and then you start off making $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year? Is that more sustainable, right? So my job is to show up and to train organizations to not think about these women in these ways that diminish or discount their power, but to think about them in ways that promotes their power. I also provide trainings for the actual women. So a lot of times when I work with the population that I work with, the women are very clear about the ways in which they've overcome things, but they're not really clear about their vision and their power and their capabilities. So I show up and say, 5 years from now, who do you want to be? And what they often say is, I've never thought about that, because my life is about day-to-day survival. And then I show up and I say, well, let me give you these stories of these women who dare to dream. And then I show up the next week, and then I show up the next month, and then before I know it, these women are daring to dream. And then I show up a month later that they've signed up for a program, or they're in school, or they've considered the possibilities, and they're pursuing the possibilities because at our very first meeting, the question was, who do you want to be 5 years from now? So that's part of what the training is. We also provide a membership. And where the membership came from was meeting with women over and over and over again, and the women saying things like, 3 o'clock in the morning, I wake up, I'm stressed, and I'm lonely. And so I said, well, I can't be available at 3 o'clock in the morning, but what I can do for you is I can build a world in which other women are available at 3 o'clock in the morning. So with the membership, there's a community, there's a forum that's open 24 hours a day. There's a bunch of women up at 3 o'clock in the morning saying, man, I can't sleep, let's talk, right? And in addition to that, there's a part of the membership platform where women can sign in, and it's the library, it's the culture and career component, where they're able to go all the way back from the 1800s to the present day, and they're able to read stories about women just like them who have survived and who are making a difference in the world. And the reason why we do that is because it's more believable when it's not just coming from me. Because I may be the ultimate unicorn, right, for them. Like, okay, there's only one Sagacious. But in fact, there's many of me. And when I make that information available, then they're able to, at 3 o'clock in the morning, say, I can do this. The other piece I do is I find for this membership, I put together a page of other women who are currently in their generation, other women who are in the organization who are doing extraordinary things, news clips, songs, plays, whatever it is these women are doing, we put it up there so folks can see these are what your peers are doing and that you're not that much different. I'll tell you a very quick story. A couple weeks ago, one of the women, so I work with a lot of women who have been in prison. There was a time where, in this particular organization, all of the women have been in prison and it was normal for them. We met a couple of weeks ago and one woman said, you know, I feel like I'm about to, my bond or whatever situation is about to be revoked, and I'm about to go back to jail. The other women were promoting her behavior, and then I had to stop and say, well, wait a minute, you all promoting her behavior, but aren't you in school, and aren't you in school, and then you just start a new job? And they're like, yeah, so, okay, so you're the only one who's still you're the outlier here. And they're like, yeah, maybe you need to kind of make some adjustments. And then so they build community around problem solving. The final piece of that membership, and the most important piece, are the weekly meetings where we come together and we talk about particular things. So if you're a woman and you're a professional, the question becomes about your visibility in the workplace. I have been working at this particular job for this particular period, and I want to move forward, but I don't seem to be heard. What are strategies that we can talk about to help us get there? My job is to help them explore these strategies. So each week we have a thing that we explore and we work on it together. Final thing is a conference that we have that's coming up in February of 2018 at the Marriott. The goal of that conference is to bring social workers together and these moms together in one space to have conversations that are not surrounding issues around a particular case. Because what happens is the social workers and the moms often come together under circumstances that are not good. And this is one space where these women can come together, or these employees and these women can come together and to talk about these particular issues, several issues. And the other piece is we want to use that space as a hiring ground. We want to be known, that conference to be known as the premier place to come to when you want to diversify your workforce, right? Because we have high quality women. So with that said, final piece, when you talk about what traction have we gained, we've done some really extraordinary things. We have been in business since March of 2016, and since then we have raised $25,000 in Kickstarter funds. We have used those funds to create a prototype for our book project. What we're trying to do with that book project now is get the book printed. The second thing we've done with that space and with our time is we have built an advisory board, which is very powerful. We have built out the membership platform, and probably one of the most powerful, most important things we've done is produce enough scholarship and research that we are inside of international journals, so people in Ireland and Germany knows the work of Infamous Mothers. In conclusion, I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to you all for being here. But there are a few special people that I want to say thank you to. I want to say thank you to Amy Gannon of Doyen Group. When we started Infamous Mothers, for months, for years, I've been trying to get this work off the ground, and we couldn't get it from concept to implementation. Worked with Amy for 4 months, and now the whole world knows my name, right? So what they do is powerful. I want to say thank you to Drew, because he was the person, when he was an attorney, who did the work to make Infamous Mothers an official LLC. And I want to say thank you to Rachel for setting the example that she has, for being a trailblazer in the ways that she has been. Thank you all.
So I was listening to a very compelling TED Talk given by a guy whose name I don't remember, and so no help there. But he made a very compelling argument to say one of the studies indicate exactly what you're saying, that people that live in impoverished conditions can't see tomorrow because they're so worried about getting to that. So his point was that instead of well-intentioned society saying, well, this is what you need, and giving them books and teddy bears and food stamps or whatever, he said give them a minimum, just give them money, right? Give them a minimum kind of living allowance, if you will. So every adult in the country would get a minimum allowance that enabled them to be fed, be housed, be clothed, and be educated. In that way, you would reduce prison. Sorry, there's a better word for it, but the number of people in prison. You would reduce things like hospital stays and medical emergencies and all sorts of things. And so I don't necessarily want to go point by point, but I'm wondering if you have an opinion of the notion of ensuring every adult many of whom would be the population that you're talking about, kind of a living wage.
So I can't speak to that because that wasn't my theory, and it's not. And I haven't had much time to think about it, but I will think about it. But here's what I can speak to. I went to a boarding school for high school, and I remember at that high school, a lot of the children or the teenagers there, their parents owned companies. And I remember the conversations that they would have over dinner table would be things like, these are the moves we made today in our company. When I was going home, there were similar conversations, but not really. There was a lot of hush-hush, a lot of quiet. And so what I realized, the difference between what was happening in Lake Forest, Illinois, and what was happening on the south side of Chicago were the types of conversations that were being had. And so the work that I do is when I show up, I have a conversation. And the conversation really is, what is it that you want for your life and what do you want for your children? I can guarantee you, you will never meet a mom who will say, I want my child to go to prison. I want my child to be on drugs. I want to, actually, as a matter of fact, I want to sell my body for a living. I can guarantee you, you will never meet anyone who says that. No one ever said as a kid, when I grew up, I want to be a prostitute or a drug addict. So what I do when I show up with no money is I say, who do you want to be when you grow up, even when they're grown? And what I challenge people to do is dream in a society or under conditions that makes them afraid to dream. That's really all I do. If you don't have the power to do anything else, you have the power to dream. And you don't realize, or you may not realize how difficult that may be for some people. Whereas for many people, that's their natural given right. For other folks, it's the thing that they're most afraid of. Because what if I believe in this thing and it's not possible for me? So I won't say give people money because I haven't thought about that enough. But what I can tell you, what works is allow people to have a dream, give people the permission to dream.
First of all, your footprint. You're just in Madison right now, is that correct?
So we're expanding, let me just say that. Next month we'll be in, how many of you have heard of Essence Magazine? So next month we'll be in Essence Magazine, and hopefully that will be the kickoff for us.
Is the goal to have chapters all over the United States?
Our goal is to have all of the YWCAs in the country that does the work, that serve the populations that we serve. Universities as well. So we have a program here called the Odyssey Project, which is a high population of the women that we serve. The goal is to have access to those women in low-income housing, those women at universities. Anywhere those women are, that's where we want to be in this country and in this world.
Is it an oversimplification to say that what you're doing is trying to create a you got to see it to be it type community where stories are transmitted or shared and role models are introduced, and through that, you know, if you can't see it, you can't get there. If you haven't heard it, you don't know it. Is that kind of what it's about?
It's a lot of it is about that, because it's more effective when I show up than when you show up. If you show up in front of a room of black women from low-income housing, they're going to look at you and say, but you're a white man. When I show up and they're like, oh, right, I am the Oprah to these women. They're like, I believe whatever you say, because your background is just like mine and you did it. And you did it with more children and more barriers than I come from 4 generations of sex workers. My father's a drug abuser, my brother's a drug. Like, I did it under the most dire situations. But the reason why I was able to do it is because I never thought that I could. It never occurred to me that this wasn't possible, right? So that's the difference. I guess the other piece is, people say that when you know better, you do better. But the reality is, when you do better, you do better. So my job is to not only say, seeing is believing. The real work of my job is to show up and say, let's talk about the pathways that we can build and the behaviors that we can develop to help you accomplish this vision. Yes.
Is it sorry.
No, go ahead.
Is it a requirement that they have children?
Yes. Well, you know what? We have, so in the black community, we have this thing called other mothers. And what that is a woman or women who have raised other people's children, but they haven't biologically birthed children. So there's a woman in our book who's never birthed a child, but she's raised about 9 of them. Right? So a woman like her counts.
So 2 questions. How do you typically find these women? And then when you look at, you mentioned the cultural differences of someone like DP walking in versus yourself. do you find you have the same issues when they're going through learning the educations of the Y work and learning how to do the program that's sustainable versus, does that cross boundaries there?
I don't understand your question.
So I guess when you're looking at the educators themselves, do they need to have similar backgrounds to these people as well in order for that to actually have a bigger difference than, say, myself sitting down and teaching them?
No. So often that can be a barrier, but that's one of the things that we do with the membership. So say, for instance, the women that we work with, if they were to work with you and they were having some type of cultural difference, part of what I would do is help them negotiate that. Because the benefit of me being there is that I've lived in both worlds consistently, right? And so I understand the language of both worlds. And so the weekly meetings are about, ultimately, if you were to say, what are the weekly meetings about? The weekly meetings are, what do we need to do to help you show up in these different places every day? What do we need to have? If your workspace is predominantly white and is male, what can we do in this space to help you show up and help you feel empowered in that space? That's what those weekly meetings are really about. So it doesn't matter who's in those spaces because they come back to us and we help them navigate those things.
What can we do as the community to support you and to further your mission?
So, a couple of things. Next month when we launch the 10,000 campaign, we're doing it on the I Fund Women platform. So we would love to have as many supporters as possible. And the 10,000 campaign is the national campaign to raise 10,000 books of the coffee table books that we have coming out so that we can provide them for free to women in low-income housing, women in prison, women in places like the YWCA, domestic abuse shelter. So when they wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, they have this beautiful coffee table book of women to inspire them. The other thing is, it's very important to us that we are able to build relationships with organizations and businesses in the community so that we can have mentors and we can have people to sponsor this particular population of women. So when we are telling women, okay, you know what, if you're interested in becoming the CEO of a company one day, we can contact this particular person for you and they can groom you in this way. If you're interested in becoming functioning upper management in this way, that we can contact this person. We want to have as many contacts with businesses and organizations and skill sets as possible so that we can groom this next level of leadership. I think that's it. That's usually the last question, right? What can we do?
No,
have you heard of Five Ventures out of New York? Take a look at them. They're actually doing some very similar things, but they're focusing on the prison population, which I think you said you had a lot of, right? Are you trying to work with the state to show here are the numbers? Do you know how many of your people that kind of come underneath your umbrella stay out of jail after they're out for a year, for 2 years? Have you started tracking those? Because those are going to be the valuable numbers to actually get kind of state to help you move.
So I can't tell you how many, well, all of the women that I've worked with have stayed out of jail in the year that I've worked with them. So that's one piece. But in terms of what I want to make clear is often when I talk about this population of women, we focus on the ones who are at the very beginning stages. But there are women that I work with who are very well established, who are running companies and who make six figures, but they closet this part of their history because it's not considered acceptable. So part of my work is to say, no, well, wait a minute. You don't have to pass as a respectable black woman in the community because there's also value in your experiences and the things that you've overcome. So I work with a cross-section of people, right? It's not just the impoverished and the folks who are challenged. There are people who have for example, I work with a woman who's a surgeon. She's a single mom, she has 3 children, but she can't really talk about her single motherhood status as a surgeon because it's not acceptable in her field, right? So I want you all, when you walk away, to think about the fact that there is a cross-section of women that I work with that are called infamous mothers.
Just one more. I obviously I see you're black and you're working with
I'm definitely black.
But why based on your background, isn't it more of a, I'm sure there's other ethnicities of women that have very similar types of things, right? So
yes.
Why limit it? Why not show that there is a cross-section?
Okay,
that
good
you are
question.
not the only one?
When you think of women on drugs, do you think of other women?
honestly, right now.
In general, in our society,
Yeah.
when you think of single moms, give me a better example. Do you think of those other women?
So my honest thing.
Not
last
you as
year-
in you, but in
No,
our
no.
society.
Right, but in the last year, the opioid pandemic is taking place in middle Ohio, right?
Yes.
And that's usually, every picture I've seen has been a white mom or a white dad who's overdosing on that drug with kids. I haven't seen a black person in that world yet. So that's what's the most general stereotype,
Yes.
is what you're saying, correct? But the last 6 months to a year have been very different from the opioid kind of a pandemic that's going around.
So let me ask you this question. When you see these people who are overdosing, often we see them connected with indictments. Often we see them connected with stories about black men who are going to prison for selling these drugs, and they're killing these white girls who are using these drugs. Right? So there's a narrative that's associated with them. Right? We don't see the overdose until we're seeing the discussion or the push to lock these folks up. Right? And so that, for me, becomes and I know this because it's the work that I eat and breathe and sleep with. Right? And so the question becomes: are we presenting this image because this is what we typically associate with drug abuse, or are we presenting this image because it's attached to this larger narrative about belly meat and about degeneracy in terms of another population? And so the general idea when we think about single moms, women addicted to drugs, sex work, is often black women, right? When we think about prison population, we're often thinking about black folks. And so my work starts with this particular population because they're the ones who have the lower resources in terms of, even if it's not in terms of financial resources, they have the lowest social resources in this society. And so I start with them because I'm one person and I started where the need was. By nature, I'm a researcher, so I start with where the gap is. Does that make sense?
Well, and I think authenticity and credibility are absolutely key to your marketing message, who you are, your value to the community. So you need to start there. That's not to say that down the road there couldn't be, take that bullseye on the target board and move it out a ring to include other people who are authentically engaged in their communities, whatever their ethnicity or racial background, whatever. But that authentic credibility has got to be kind of the door opener to any conversation, not only with your constituent candidate community, but also businesses that you might be advocating for those candidates down the road, right?
Yes. And the other piece to think about is when you're able to address kind of the most vulnerable population, then you're already addressing everyone else. So when we did the Kickstarter last year and we raised the $25,000, I remember interviewing with a very wealthy white woman who owned a couple of businesses, and she said, I see my story in these women's stories. And so what I have discovered is if I position myself in this population and I come in these particular spaces, what really surprised me is when white men started crying and saying, I see myself in these black women's stories. For me, then my job is done. When people who don't look anything like this particular population is able to say, I'm able to identify, then I've started with the right population, because the likelihood of me telling a story about a white man or me being a white man and promoting the work that I do and finding a black woman to say, I can identify with this white man, that's going to be unlikely, because white men are not trained to be vulnerable in our society. They're not trained to talk about where they're struggling or where they're insecure. They're not trained to talk about when I was a kid I was molested. That is not the way our culture is set up, right? And so what is the likelihood of that happening? But with this particular population, we have made a history of selling their bodies, and we've made a history of using their bodies in terms of labor force. And so since they're already on display, so this is what we have already done as a society, my job is to show up, to not cover them, but to remind them of their dignity since they're already on display. And then everyone else can say, you know what, I can see myself in this. And so that is the heart and soul of what Infamous Mothers is. And I guess the other thing is, if you go to the website, the other heart and soul of what we do is, Infamous Mothers is a real mind screw, right? Because when you when you go to the website and you see these beautiful images, you say, this is not what I thought this was going to be about. And it makes you stop and think, well, who exactly are these women? And how deep is this rabbit hole? So it's to create beautiful disharmony is the other piece.
Hey.
Hi.